friends, and welcome to another video from my series Quick Thoughts On, in which I always talk about different stories from the rich Star Trek universe. A couple of days ago, the next episode of Star Trek Picard premiered. It was called Maps and Legends, and these are my honest opinions about it. If I should describe it with just one word, it would be mess. If I should describe it with two words, it would be confusing mess. Do you remember how I last week said that it would be great to see how the synthetics have killed people on Mars? Well, this episode starts with exactly this, with a scene in which we see a synth hanging out with his human colleagues when he suddenly snaps and starts to kill them one by one. And then he kills himself. And then we jump 14 years to the future. So why is this scene in the beginning of episode 2 and not episode 1? Is it somehow relevant to episode 2? No, absolutely not. So why is this in the beginning of episode 2? No clue. So what do we see next? Do you remember how I said last week that it would be nice to see a scene in which Picard and the Romulan elves would examine the footage instead of simply telling us that Dash is not visible on the footage? Well, now we get that scene. Why now? What is the chronology? So Dash dies in Los Angeles, Picard gets knocked out and wakes up in Paris. Wait, now that I think about it, how did he wake up in Paris? Did they beam him to a different continent? What's happening? Then his Romulan servants told him that they examined the footage and told him that the cameras didn't capture her or her attackers. Then he went to Japan and so on, and now they all explored the footage again. Why? The editing so far is actually really bad. So the Romulans suddenly claim that they all have been deleted from the video. Picard thinks that the Romulan Secret Service called Tal Shiar is behind of it, but no, it's actually an even secreter organization called the Zhat Vash. And then the bad editing gets even worse. We intercut between Picard and the Romulan woman having a conversation in his chateau in France, and them both exploring Dash's apartment in Boston. Seriously, what the hell do you think you're doing? Was the editor drunk? Why do I feel I want too much when I want my Star Trek story to make at least some sense? So how did they get to Dash's apartment? They beam inside of it. Wait, what? Where they did beam from? Did they beam there from Paris? How is it possible that you can beam into different people's apartments? Don't you see that this is a huge security problem in a world which has transporter technology? The Romulan woman, and I swear I will try to remember her name next week, pulls out her magic wand, and in the reality in which they are in Boston, she somehow manages to recreate the full video of Dash and her boyfriend. How? I mean, this is technological nonsense. This is not science fiction. This is not science fantasy. This is clearly turning into a fairy tale. So then they try to do some technobabble, but they suck even at doing technobabble. We are forced to watch them saying absolutely nonsensical gibberish, when the only important result from this scene is that they think that Dash's sister contacted her from space, which for Picard is a weird thing. Why is that a weird thing for you, Captain Picard? You used to serve in space, did you forget? Nothing really important happens in the reality in which they are in France, but I have to talk about one thing. The female elf Romulan thing suddenly says, "Those cheeky fuckers." That's a line in Star Trek. Do you remember when Star Trek used Shakespeare-inspired language? Nah, who needs Shakespeare when you can have cheeky fuckers? And with a nice English accent. Why did I end that scene with confused laughter? Meanwhile, on the Borg cube, Dash, the sister of Dash, and the weird Romulan from the ending of the previous episode have sex together in their underwear. because there's nothing weird about having sex in your underwear. Everybody knows that TV sex is always best when both of them have their underwear on. What is confusing to me is that they have just met in the previous scene. Plus, he used to have bad teeth and a crazy eye, so why does he look normal right now? How much time has passed between the two scenes? It feels like several months have passed. He had two important surgeries and they kind of got together. Well, they both work on the Borg cube or artifact as Soji, that's hopefully her name, calls it. Picard gets a visit from an old doctor friend, but it's not Dr. Crusher, because that would make sense. It's his doctor from the Stargazer. And he has bad news for him. Picard has basically space dementia. No, they don't say the name of the illness, so it's hard to say if it's supposed to be the same syndrome he had in the alternate future from All Good Things, but I call it space dementia or space Alzheimer's. But enough of this story. Picard goes to San Francisco using some cool new tech which looks like a public shower. Oh no, there are public transporters? Wait, so there are these gates, and when you go through them they transport you somewhere? Do all of them lead to the same place? Because I don't see any transporter chief setting up any target information, any coordinates and things like that. You know, some little information about where you want to get beamed. Picard enters a Starfleet building, which looks nothing like any Starfleet building we have seen before. He sees a hologram of the USS Enterprise, but no, it's not the USS Enterprise, it's the Abomination which we have seen in Star Trek Discovery. Is there anybody out there who has a better explanation than the contractually obligated 25% difference? Anyway, the hologram switches to the USS Enterprise D, and this one actually looks like our Enterprise D. So wait, did they buy the rights to use Picard's ship, but they didn't buy the rights to use Kirk's Enterprise? Also, why are there holograms of these two specific starships and no others? There's a weird guy who I assume is supposed to be the receptionist, asking Picard what is he doing there, as in he has no clue who Picard is. The same dude works under a giant hologram of the USS Enterprise D, but he doesn't know who Picard is. Jean-Luc has to even spell the name to him. Also, I'm surprised that they hired a black guy to play the only uneducated person in the scene, considering how Hollywood people like labeling everybody else as racists. Picard goes to Admiral Witchface, who is, what a surprise, a horrible bitch to him, with no good reason. He says that he needs a ship and is willing to get demoted to captain again, but the Admiral drops another F-bomb and kicks him out, meaning Picard has to get help from an old friend. No, nobody who we have seen before. That would be way too exciting. Soji meets a random black chick who is the new scientist lady for them, and they are instructed by some 90s emo punk who is, I suppose, a Romulan, because while the characters look like they used to look for decades, right? Also, the black scientist lady is apparently a Trill, which brings me to dozens of new questions. If I remember correctly, all of the Trill we have seen so far were white, right? So do the Trill have the same races as we humans? Could this show please tell us at least something? Just establish something. Also, where are her tattoos? When we have seen the first Trill, he had the head bumps. They dropped them later for Deep Space Nine, but every Trill we have seen so far had tattoos all over their body. This woman doesn't have them. Why? This is killing me. I need explanations. So what? Some Trills do have the tattoos and some do not? Or did they simply forget that it was a thing? Or is this the 25% different Trill? And the two women think that the Romulan guy, who is, I think, Narek, they think that he is hot? Really? I mean, as a straight person, which, yes, I am straight, I swear, mom. So, as a straight guy, I'm not really good at telling which guy is hot and which one isn't, but we are talking about a guy with horrible teeth and a crazy eye, or at least he had them in the previous episode. Picard and blonde scientist lady have Earl Grey together. He tells her that he doesn't like science fiction. Ha ha ha, that's so funny, because Patrick Stewart is famous for acting in Dune, Star Trek The Next Generation and the X-Men franchise, and I'm totally not sarcastic, but it makes no sense for his character to not like science fiction. Why else did you spend half of your life in space? People want to be astronauts, usually thanks to science fiction. We also have a glimpse of what the Romulans are doing with the Borg. They are removing their implants and selling them, I guess. Who actually cares? And to be even more confusing, in the end we see Admiral Bitchface calling to a Romulan officer about Picard. So, what the hell is going on? Does the Admiral know she is talking to a Romulan officer, or does she think she is human? Does the human Admiral work for the Tal Shiar or the Jadvash? So, the Romulan Secret Service is the organization which is against immigration of Romulans? I am really confused, but the episode doesn't end yet. Picard gets wine and he grabs a cab and parks it outside of the famous rock formation in Vasquez Rocks, where he meets his old friend, a woman we never saw before. Why does he need a cab suddenly when he was beaming everywhere he wanted during the whole episode, including beaming to other continents? Oh, and Narek is a spy and is the brother of a woman who works for the second woman. Wow, what a twist. Who would ever expect that the guy who behaves like a spy is a spy? This episode was a giant letdown. Through the whole story I was thinking to myself that this is so stupid that it must be an Akiva Goldsman script, and what a surprise! It was co-written by Akiva Goldsman. Yes, the same Akiva Goldsman who wrote the Joel Schumacher Batman movies. Every one of his scripts is just stupid nonsense, but he for some reason keeps getting work for decades, similar to Kurtzman, the more I think about it. I really liked the first episode, but in this episode I like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 scenes. Absolutely every single thing which happens in this episode is stupid. The editing is horrible. The acting, well, I actually think Patrick Stewart has delivered a much better performance than last week. The cinematography is still pretty good. The director is the same as in the last episode, and she is pretty good with directing small character scenes. So the worst thing about this episode is the script. Call me old-fashioned, but I like it when stories make sense. On my standard scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is complete garbage, 10 is a masterpiece, and 5 is just average, I would give this episode 4 out of 10. I really hope that this was the bad one and the rest will be better. And I hope they will eventually get to space from episode 4. But as always, these were just my opinions. Let me know, what did you think about this episode? Did you love it or hate it? Was it better than the first one or worse? Let me know down in the comment section, and see you very soon, hopefully tomorrow, if my voice doesn't die completely. Thanks a lot for watching, and bye.